The Working Artist Project is brought to you by Second Line Arts Collective. Learn how you can support at secondlinearts.org.
We're creating a platform for those who are curious, one that tells the story from the artist's perspective. Moments in time, captured from the innovators who are reshaping dance, music, theater, and the visual arts. This is the Working Artist Project.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. My name is Darrian Douglas, and this is the Working Artist Project. I'm back again with the one and only Gregory Agid. What up, Greg?
Hey, good evening, Darrian. How are you?
You know what, man? I'm pretty good tonight. I feel pretty good. I got a okay night's sleep. My kids slept for a total of 1 hour and 30 minutes. So,
you're well rested.
I can do anything, bro. Ain't nothing I can't do today, baby.
I was telling you earlier, for all y'all listening, Darrian has this beautiful, beautiful daughter. And I was checking out this video that his wife posted the other day. And I sent a message. I was like, man, Darrian, you got the cutest little girl ever. But I guess it makes sense now. She's got some beautiful eyes, but they look very mischievous.
Hey, look, man, she definitely on a vibe sometimes, man. But we got some special happening tonight. But before we get to that, I definitely want to update you guys about what's happening, where to sign up for our newsletter and all of that. Well, and our little summer camp that we got going on. So if you go to secondlinearts.org, you can sign up for our newsletter, and Greg is going to give you a $1 billion idea every week. And
$1 billion idea.
My ideas are 1 trillion. So pay attention to my emails more than you do his, but And I'll let Greg tell you all about the camp.
Oh man, I'm just gonna put a link to federal assistance, the PPP assistance. That's a $1 billion idea right there. But for all of y'all who know some young people out there who are interested in pursuing a career in the arts, music, and want to learn about the business and entrepreneurship, we hope that you guys will consider coming to our Sanaa Music Workshop. I believe it's from the June 14th through the 25th this year, and due to some very generous contributions from the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation, the Bornstein family, the Anderson family. We have one more that I'm forgetting.
The Carrera family.
And
and EPNO.
And EPNO. So all those wonderful organizations and people have helped make this year's camp free. And we hope that you all will sign up. And I believe our registration will be closing in the next 2 weeks. So please sign up. And that's your $1 billion idea right there.
There you go. So let's get straight to business. Tonight we have a very special guest. I think we've never had a composer of his caliber on the show, and also we've never had someone who has wrote a show that's on Netflix. And you know what I mean? He's really a really versatile guy. I'm gonna let Greg introduce him because that's his homie.
Let me just say that as a musician who plays an orchestra, you either love or hate your conductor. And and I remember when we did our first rehearsal with Bublé, we did the first rehearsal with no conductor, and then maybe like 2 or 3 days later, this gentleman flew in, and from the first downbeat, it was like, oh, this guy is killing. And let me tell you, I've never followed a conductor that was more clear, concise, and he would like call out random notes in the string section, or whoever was like, hey man, you're a little bit flat, or you missed this one note. But really just a a classy gentleman, an extremely incredible musician, and one of the hardest workers I've ever seen. Because let me tell you, while we were hanging in the front of the bus watching movies and chilling, this guy was in the back every single night on his laptop doing something. And I guess we'll find out what he was working on for that year and a half on the bus tonight. But we have
Absolutely.
a wonderful composer, wonderful conductor, Mr. Nicholas Olof Jacobson-Larson on the show.
Yeah.
So watching a lot of cat videos back there.
You were watching cat. Come on, you know you were, because the internet didn't work. Come on.
Good to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, bro.
Nick, how you doing?
Good, man. Good. How are you, Greg?
Man, I'm just, just doing well, practicing, shedding, and glad to have you on the show this evening.
Glad to be here.
Man. So what's been going on in your life, man? How have you been doing post apocalypse?
Post apocalypse, yeah. I mean, it's I think we're always waiting to see when we're going back on the road with Michael, and then that seems to kind of continually be getting further and further pushed down the road. But yeah, in addition to that, it's always a balance of musical projects and screenwriting projects. And right now it's kind of, let's see, what am I doing? This week I'm doing some commercial spots, doing a film, a 15-minute kind of a profile film about a country singer named Ingrid Andress, Grammy-nominated singer, which I can talk more about this later, but working on that with Eric Curtis, who's Michael Bublé's bass player.
Oh, wow.
And then my writing partner and I on the screenwriting side, Dalton Lieb, we have a number of, this is going to be the most annoying answer, the most Hollywood answer, a number of things that we're very excited about, but we can't talk about just yet.
Yeah, please don't talk about it. We don't want you going to jail or
Yeah, exactly.
Getting sued for $1 million because of what you said on the show tonight.
Yeah.
Hey, man, if it's got anything to do with Marvel, man, can we talk about it when we get off the show?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Man, something, Nick, that's super interesting for me about you is your diversity. And I definitely want to get into that, because I don't know that people who are conductors are also screenwriters and involved in Hollywood. It seems like a lot of times, especially classical musicians are more focused on just that, and everything else is terrible. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, why are you so diverse? Why are you better than the rest of them?
I think that when I was younger, I did feel more pressure to kind of commit and focus on doing one thing. I'll backtrack a little bit further to answer your question with some context, but a lot of classical musicians just grow up being a classical musician, and you grow up, you study cello or whatever, and you just do that, and your goal is to play in an orchestra or be a soloist or maybe teach at a university or something. I grew up playing classical piano. My mom was a piano teacher, and then playing cello. And I sort of had that classical background, but then I also had a pretty big rock background, and was a rock and jazz guitar player in my teens. And I'm mediocre at everything now. Whatever chops I once had of now, they're in the rearview mirror. But I guess the sort of common thread is that if I'm diverse, it's because I just do whatever seems like it's going to be fun, and just sort of follow that impulse of and that's what's led me into writing as well. Just have an interest in it, and ultimately, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, I had some sort of heart-to-heart moments with my uncle, who was a classical pianist who passed away earlier this year. His name was Leon Fleischer, and he would always say, he wanted me to focus on being a classical composer. He comes from the classical world, and he had heard some of my orchestral music, and I think, maybe saw enough of a hint of promise where he was like, if you just focus on that, you could be really, really good at that. And I think for a while, I felt the pressure to do that, not just because of him. And then later he and I talked again, and I kind of said, ultimately that's just not who I am at the end of the day. If I'm going to be maybe a bunch of these things, maybe I'll be happy just being mediocre at everything. But my life feels, I'm very happy doing all these different things. And my writing partner and I have a bunch of, scripts that we're writing that and I love that stuff just as much as I love conducting for Michael, and love that just as much as I love, writing film music. So it's a long-winded answer to your question, but ultimately the diversity comes from a diversity of interests.
Okay.
That's crazy. Just for the record, I think you mentioned something about mediocrity once or twice. And just for the record, there's nothing mediocre about anything you do. It's always Greg, very high level.
Yeah, I was going to say, so Greg was one of the first people I met because we joined the band, Michael's band, at the same time. And I think, I'm trying to remember we chatted when we realized we were going to be on the same bus, I think. Yeah. Because Greg and I ride the same bus together when we're vagabonding around. But man, it's this funny thing with that gig too, because I don't know about you guys, but for what I do, I never intended to be a touring musician. The thought crossed my mind, but it's never something I was working towards with that as a goal in mind. The way it had happened, and this is a roundabout way of getting back to what we're talking about, but the way that it happened was I'd been doing some more conducting for other composers in town, like film score recording sessions and stuff, and got a call to do a performance on The Voice with Michael, and it was just going to be a one-time. They had an orchestra and they needed a conductor, and so I did that, and then got to know Alan Chang, Michael's music director, and a few weeks later, Alan was like, "Hey, can you meet for coffee?" And he actually lives a mile and a half away from me.
Oh, wow.
Los Feliz, and he's close to me here. And we hung out. He was like, "Oh yeah, we need a conductor for this tour. We have 100 and some dates coming up. Can you do it?" And I talked to my now wife, and again, it was never something that was planned on or expected, but we're like, "Oh, it seems like a cool opportunity." And now that it's this funny thing where now that I've done it, I'm so happy that I got to meet all these people like Greg and Alan and Michael and the other good friends that I have in the Buble band. I'm rambling like a crazy person, but hopefully that sort of gives some context. And Greg, I mean, you can say I'm not mediocre, but all I mean by that is, we get in those situations where we have an hour, right, to rehearse the new strings in town. And 99% of the time, I'm the chill conductor who's your friend. And then, as Greg can attest, there's a dark side that can come out.
I can't remember what
he probably has the quotes better than I do, but
I can't remember it. Oh my God, it was so funny.
He made a meme of it.
Nick, I'll tell you from my own experience. I'm a jazz musician.
Yeah.
And I've been in some situations where I'm in the orchestra, and conductors are always mean. And so I believe that you are also a very chill, but also a vicious human being. If you miss a note, man, a conductor is on your ass, and you just man, it's 1,000 notes, man. How you hearing mine, bro?
Right.
I think one of my favorite moments of the tour, I'm going to throw you under the bus here, but the quote was, there's two tempos happening. The one I'm conducting and the one you're playing.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But I think that only happened, out of 150 or so shows, I think that only happened once.
Well, and I think we're sort of naturally gravitating to one of the things that's interesting and also difficult about doing that job, which is that you have this wealth of experience in front of you, and all these musicians are so good, and they have their whole, I'm the same age as everybody there. Sometimes I'm younger than everybody there, especially in LA when I'm conducting an orchestra for a recording session. It's I'm in my mid 30s. There's a lot of people that were playing for John Williams in the 80s that are in front of you, and so you have to kind of that teaches you humility, I guess, and that the old days of Toscanini throwing batons and being a tyrant are long gone, and also don't contribute. I mean, I think it's a myth that that type of, you know, dictator conductor actually can bring about the best performance. I think that like it's a strange psychological thing where you do need to, you have a few seconds when you're meeting a new group of players to somehow command their respect, and it's a weird moment, that first like minute of what do you say and then how do you start a rehearsal. But the way that I've approached it is trying to make it clear to players that I take the work seriously, but don't take myself seriously at all. And that's the way that I've, over the years, sort of like, I've gotten to that point only after a bunch of kind of awkward false starts and trying to be the serious guy who's like authoritative, but then I just can't do it. And then hopefully just the work speaks for itself. And as Greg mentions, if I'm calling out something that I hear that, you know, needs to be fixed, then if players have musical respect for you, it will come from your ability to hear problems and then fix them quickly and do it in a way that doesn't make them feel like shit. You want to make them feel like valued human beings and members of the orchestra, and not just like sort of a vessel for you to, you know. And also it's like we're playing some amazing big band charts, but it's not Mahler, you know what I mean? Like we're playing a lot of times to a click track and stuff. And it's like a lot of times my job is really more ceremonial than it is really driving the tempo or something. Whereas on some of the more rubato tunes, then that's where I earn my money, is on the rubato tunes where it really requires a conductor.
Yeah. And just for the record, I just want to say that Nick has always held himself with the utmost class and respect for everyone. And literally, I didn't even think about that moment until just now, since you brought it up.
No, man, I
Nick had a
believe
tremendous.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Nick had a tremendous responsibility every night that we were playing while we were on the road, and he had to rehearse 50 string players in 1 hour for a show that was like gonna, you know, house 12 or so thousand people, and so that's you know, and it could be an incredibly stressful situation, and to do it over and over every single night with new people is could be quite a challenge and quite exhausting. But I just wanted to say that, like, watching you do that all the time, you always did it with the utmost class and efficiency too, which is really cool.
Thank you. Part of that comes too from having Alan and I sort of tag teaming those rehearsals. Alan Michaels, MD, plays piano during the rehearsal, and you know, we can sort of he's done this gig for 17, 18 years. So if anybody knows the intricacies of these tunes, it's definitely Alan. So it makes, I think it makes both of our jobs easier, that we can sort of tackle that inherently difficult thing as a team, and you know, get through the sound check and get to the show, and hopefully everything sounds okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, man. I was just gonna go back to your experience with Micah at The Voice for a couple of reasons. Just because I think the band, I don't know, I wanted to hate that show. You know, I watched it and stuff, but the band on that show, I think, is probably the greatest band on earth because they can play anything. But your experience with meeting somebody like Michael Bublé, and then him immediately being like, "I want to bring you on a road with me," must means that you are like an amazing human being. Because you know, because he's like, all right, this dude's cool. You know, there's 1,000 dudes that can be a conductor. You know what I mean? But you have to have that X factor, and I'm curious if you know what that is for yourself.
You know, I actually think I do. I think I know what it is for me, and I think it's different for other conductors. And I was kind of speaking to this earlier. I think for me, and the reason I know it is because I've heard musicians in town that I respect a lot basically tell me this, which is that, and Greg has alluded to this as well, like we can work really, really hard and we can produce, whether again, it's for a recording for a film score, or it's like, I obviously not so much in the past year, but I also conduct some like pretty crazy brand new contemporary concert music, you know, a bar of 7/16, a bar of 11, you know, blah, 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 like some crazy metric stuff, and crazy atonal stuff too. And it's again, it's about like taking the job really seriously, but like never confusing that with yourself being important, you know? And I think that, I don't know, I mean, I have the most fun when I'm making things I'm really proud of with people who just like to laugh and have fun, and are like, yeah, you can be working on something really, really serious and like really important piece of art or something, but like there's no reason that you have to be the typical self-important, like the conductor has like a very self-important image, I think, in classical culture. And I think, Darrian, you alluded to it a little bit earlier of like for like some classical people, it's like, nope, it's just classical and everything else sucks. And like, I look to Gustavo Dudamel, who's like obviously a brilliant classical musician, but man, that dude loves rock and pop and rap and R&B. And like, I feel exactly the same way about music. It's just like, if it's good, it's good.
Right.
And it's so cool to see somebody who represents the classical tradition, but also doesn't talk down to other traditions, if that answers your question.
Oh, absolutely. Perfect, man. Thank you.
Yeah, man. I really love what you said. You said I take the work seriously, but I don't take myself seriously. And I think that that speaks volumes as to how to get the job done while also making friends and keeping the gig.
Yeah, and especially when you're on the road, it's like you want to like the people you're with, you know what I mean? And so having fun is such a key component of it, because you're cramped together on a bus, or you're flying around Europe or Australia or wherever it is. And it's like, you know, it's kind of like dorm life. These people are sort of your dorm floor. Yeah.
Family.
I want to take this second to go ahead and let the people hear some of your work here. And
sure.
So here we go. I'm gonna play it and you can tell them about it as soon as we get done.
Okay. Yeah, it fades out.
Spoken like the man who wrote the music. Yeah, it just cuts out.
Yeah, it's just the same chord, just up the octave. We get it. It slows down. Surprise, surprise.
That was a vibe, man. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so that's from a movie called Rwanda and Juliet. That's the main theme to that movie, which I think was around 2015, I want to say, directed by Ben Proudfoot, who last night was nominated for an Oscar. Unfortunately did not win, but Ben is an old friend and a collaborator of mine. And I think that was my first time. I think that was the first time I recorded at Warner's. We recorded at Warner Brothers with, I think, like a 35-ish piece orchestra.
So cool.
Wow.
And, you know, we're talking specifically about film composing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, really rare to find directors and production companies that want to put the money into a real live recording, when MIDI mockups and samples have come so far as to be able to fool most people's ears. Even musicians, sometimes I can play them a mockup and they're convinced that it was a real orchestra. In this case, Ben he's a dude who, you know, he's so old fashioned and he just loves that Hollywood sound. So we got to record that whole score there with, you know, some of the best studio players on the planet, guys who have, you know, played on all the movie scores going back to probably like, you know, in E.T. and Indiana Jones and stuff. Some of those guys are still around.
That's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the cue that we just listened to is the sort of, as you can imagine, the emotional climax of the movie, and very old-fashioned thematic writing, really tonal, melodic stuff, which I love to do. But if we listen to any of the other stuff, there has to be this represents maybe one end of the spectrum,
Right.
and you have to, as a film composer, be able to do a variety of different styles.
Yeah. How does it work, man? Like, as a touring musician, cats kind of just know you through your reputation, but when you write music, how do you get started in that? Like, how do people know that you can do it and give you an opportunity to do it?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, I think that maybe another common thread that might emerge here chatting is that, like, you get recommended when people think you do a good job. And I think that I was trying to think about this in advance of chatting with you guys. And I think that there's one time in my entire 10, 11 years of doing this professionally that I like wrote a demo for a project and actually got the project.
Oh, wow.
One time. And I've written fucking hundreds of demos, and every other one I did not get. And I'm not an anomaly. That's par for the course.
Okay.
So to answer your question, I mean, somebody hears that you wrote some music, they liked it, they tell their friend who's a filmmaker, that filmmaker invites you for lunch, and you chit chat, and they say, "Oh, I have a project coming up. Would you want to talk about it?" And then you hopefully do a good enough job and have a good enough vibe creatively and personally with the filmmaker that they ask you to do their next project. Okay. And in this particular case, the reason I sent you this cue is that Ben Proudfoot, the director, is a guy he's the guy that I've worked with the most in a film scoring capacity over the last decade. Mm-hmm. And that's how that relationship started, is that somebody sent him some music of mine, and we hung out, and we've been working together ever since.
Wow. See, that X factor just keep on knocking down shit, man. Mm-hmm. I loved it.
It's funny because hundreds of demos and you only got one, and I think that's definitely a theme that has been constant throughout my life, and I'm sure the same with Darrian. It's just like, work comes from the personal relationships mm-hmm. that you have, but also you can do the job. You can do the job plus the right people. Mm-hmm. But I was curious, like, so what would you consider your first big break, or what was like the first job that you feel maybe like kind of put you on the map in terms of film scoring?
Yeah, it's a funny thing. Like, I think that when you look back, it's sometimes easier to pinpoint what that thing was. But for me, I think this is also because I don't just do that. If I was doing that with 100% of my time, maybe I would be doing different projects if that was the only thing I was focused on. And so, yeah, I guess I don't know if I think that score was probably one of the ones that I'm the most proud of, but I'm not sure if that's one of the ones that made the biggest splash necessarily. I did a show for Amazon that unfortunately got canceled, which I thought was really great. It's a kids animated show that was several years ago. And I think sometimes you think like, oh, this is the big, it's a big name, it's a big company or whatever, and like life's just going to be easy now, and the gigs are going to be pouring in. And that has not been my experience. And I don't mean that to say like that I'm bitter about that. That I think that's just the reality, is that it's a constant pounding of the pavement, which, as you guys being more players, and also I know composers and writers as well, you can have big flashy gigs and you can have big flashy credits, but you're still finding the next thing. And hopefully you get to a certain point where you can just sit there and say no to a bunch of stuff and only take the cool stuff. But again, I find so many things to be cool that I find myself saying yes a lot of the time.
That's what's up. The interesting thing about being an artist / entrepreneur is the continuation. Like you have to always be planting a seed. It's like, mm-hmm. I'm gonna plant a seed, and in 10 years, you're gonna be a little baby plant. You're gonna give me some money, and you just keep doing that throughout your career.
Yeah, That is the truth of it. There are things both on the music side and on the screenwriting side where I have thought, and my writing partner Dalton and I have thought on the screenwriting side, oh, that project is dead. That's too bad. Nobody liked it. And now they're legitimate, like there's some fucking momentum behind it and there's stuff happening. And again, that falls into the unfortunate Hollywood bullshit category of, I can't go into a ton of details, but things that we're very, very excited about. And then things in the music side as well, where it's like, you know, yeah, you think you did this thing and nobody cared. And then 7 years later, somebody's like, dude, I heard this piece of music that you wrote for this thing. Will you come and blah, blah, blah. And that's just the strange way that life works.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to hit, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Man, let's listen to another one. Is that cool? Is that cool?
Yeah.
Let's listen to this
Sure.
one. Hey man, look, I used to play violin when I was about 5, man. You know, hey, if you need a violin player, man, hit me up, dog. That was beautiful, man. That was beautiful.
Thanks.
So tell us a little bit about that piece.
So I included that one and then the final one, if we get a chance to listen to it, for different reasons. That one was a mixture. The first thing we listened to was all live orchestra, conducted by me in a on a soundstage. That was that second piece was for, I guess, what I would categorize as a bill payer project. I won't say exactly what it's for, but it's for a corporate client, also directed by Ben Proudfoot, who I mentioned earlier, and a hybrid of MIDI instruments, meaning, you know, I think the piano and the percussion, maybe a couple other things are MIDI, and then you know, a string quartet, and live flute and clarinet, flute and clarinet, I think was the lineup. So again, speaking specifically to film scoring, like that, a part of your life as you are trying to only score, you know, studio films is going to be doing commercial projects and branded content and things like that sometimes are really, really wonderful to work on. And then sometimes you need to pay rent. And so you are a musician and you do this. I'm not saying that this piece of music was that necessarily, but just including it as an example of something where you're using your skill set in order to put food on the table. And it's the business of show, you know what I mean? And beyond that, I'm not sure if there's anything else interesting musically about that or
well, maybe would you mind kind of digging into I guess some of the people watching or the future listeners of this may not understand that what MIDI is, and again, like maybe the process of doing like virtual recordings. So I would, maybe if you wouldn't mind talking about like the difference between maybe like going into the studio and doing something with a string section versus like getting a commission like this piece where you're actually like charting it out on Logic or Pro Tools and then sending off a couple parts to have live musicians play, and how does that all work?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess like I'll just talk through the what is to me a very mundane and boring sort of like process of like from getting the gig to delivering the thing. And you guys just tell me to shut up when it gets too boring. So you've gotten the gig, and as we talked about, you got that gig because you knew somebody and you had a good vibe and they gave you a chance, basically. So then you once you have a locked cut of the picture, whether that's a feature film or a 30-second commercial, that just means that the director and producers have decided, okay, this is not going to change anymore. The timing is locked. And so thus the composer can write music to picture, the timing being locked, meaning that that won't change, so the music won't change.
Mm-hmm.
So then you do what's called a spotting session, where you sit down with the director and you spot through the film or the commercial or whatever it is, and you talk about where the music will go, what the purpose of the music will be, depending on the musical acumen of your director, or vocabulary of your director, maybe some instrumentation choices. I work with everybody from like, some directors are like, dude, I have no idea, just do your thing, to, again, in these first two examples, Ben is probably the most musical director, the most musical film director I've ever worked with. And he can, talk about oboe and diminuendo and crescendo, and we should have a string ostinato. And I think he also really likes to use musical words when he learns them. But he has a command of the vocabulary, which is really helpful for me, because I can then know, okay, well, he's really clear about what he wants here. That makes my job a million times easier. So you talk through all that, then I will write a draft of the music in my sequencing software, which I use Logic. And what I'm doing is I have the picture and I'm taking all the spotting notes that we've discussed, and I'm writing a piece of music using MIDI instruments. MIDI is an acronym for, what is it? Musical Instrument Digital Interface, I think.
I think so.
Basically,
I'm pretty sure I slept through that day of class.
I'm a fucking nerd for knowing that. You're basically using computerized instruments to create a mock-up that then you can play back for the director, and they can listen to it and look at it and decide, is this working? Is this what I intended? Or do we need to make changes? Usually you need to make changes because maybe you got close to what they were thinking, but so you do a round or two or three, or depending, sometimes many rounds of revisions until the director has approved of it. And then depending on whether or not you're going to record the whole score live or the entire thing is MIDI, in other words, in the box, just with your computerized sounds, there's two sort of paths from there. So the MIDI path would be, I would finesse solve my MIDI, because I've played every single part into the sequencer on a keyboard, whether it's an oboe or a taiko drum or something. And sometimes you have to tweak those a lot and do a lot of kind of magic and surgery to make those things sound as realistic as possible. And then you will deliver the final score, usually in, I know that you guys know what this is, but for some of your listeners, you will do what's called bouncing stems, where you'll take the sections of the ensemble, say if it's a traditional orchestra, you will bounce several different stems, which are essentially just like wave files or MP3s of like groups of instruments. So I might bounce, if I have a 3-minute piece of music, I'll bounce a stem of just the woodwinds, then just the brass, then just the timpani, then just the pitched percussion, and so forth down the score of the orchestra. And the reason for that is that then when they're doing the final mix, the director can say, oh, now that we have final sound and final dialogue into this mix, that triangle part is actually super distracting. So then they can go into that stem and lower that triangle part without messing with the overall mix of the music.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, man. So now that everybody's a MIDI master, but I think that what the important part that people can get from that is sometimes they ask you to play every part because of finances. Maybe it's cheaper for them to just pay you versus 30 people. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how we get into that. Man, Look, let's play this other one, and then we're gonna continue our conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, bro. Hey, man, that
It's
one
so
piece of music
stupid.
had everything in it, man. That was crazy.
What is
Yeah.
that instrument on there?
Well, let me set the stage for this one, because this is an example of a demo for a project that I did not get. And,
Okay.
I include it for that reason, but also, I mean, if you think about stylistically, like this thing versus the first thing, like obviously they're pretty far apart. This was I think a demo for a movie. I think it was for a movie, and I think all I got was from my agent. I got like a brief that said like surf guitars with like a Middle Eastern flair, and also it's a spy movie. Something. It was like some ridiculous combination of very disparate elements, and so I kind of was like, all right, fuck it, we'll just have fun with this. And actually, I think it's a really fun piece of music, and Darrian, one of the things you were saying earlier was about like having, they want you to play all the instruments. This is a case where, so I'm a guitar player. I'm not really a great guitar player anymore, but used to be a decent guitar player. So anything with guitar, I can play, and that makes it easy for anything guitar based for me to throw stuff on and have it sound halfway decent without having to like farm it out to somebody. So anytime there's like guitar stuff, even though, again, as I said, I'm totally insecure about my chops these days, but it's still super fun to do that kind of stuff. So the other instruments in the thing, man, it's been years, but the little Middle Eastern riff, the whatever it is, like that's just a sample where I'm like pressing middle C, and it like does that whole thing. You know what I mean? Like it's, and I think that was my like, okay, am I gonna really successfully mock up by actually playing something that's gonna sound legit, or can I just buy this sample pack? And I just did that, and again, didn't get the job, but who knows? Maybe that's why.
Hey man, when you said surf, rock, spy, Middle Eastern, that was exactly. I think you nailed it.
Yeah, like every 4 bars was a different experience. Like, oh shit, okay, cool.
Yeah, it speaks to the absurdity of doing what we have to do to get jobs.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Darrian.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Nick, I kind of want to get more into the screenwriting, and you've had some dope stuff happening on that end. You do so much that it's hard to fit it all into an hour, so I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about that. You've had stuff on Amazon or Hulu.
So sometimes, when I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between talking about music and talking about writing, it gets a little convoluted. But on the screenwriting side of things, we don't have anything that is currently on. We have things that have sold and things that are in development. So the one thing that's public is a year and a few months ago, my writing partner Dalton and I sold a sci-fi movie called Endurance, a script that we wrote to Netflix, which Greg can attest to. It was funny because that happened while we were in New Zealand, maybe.
You got a shout out on stage, man.
Dude, Buble, so dramatic. It was great. Yeah, he like made this big announcement about it. It was pretty funny.
Nice.
but so that movie, the publicly announced things that I can talk about are, we have this wonderful producer, Simon Kinberg, who found the script. Our agents at CAA had sent it to him, and he wrote Mr. and Mrs. Smith. He wrote the Sherlock Holmes movies. He wrote and produced a lot of the X-Men movies. He's a heavy hitter, and because he is also a brilliant screenwriter, he was able to look at that script and help us make it even better before we took it out to the market and sold it. So that is, again, I think that was over a year ago that it sold, but there are things happening on that, and hopefully we'll be able to like talk about what those things are really soon. But like a lot of things, it's seeds planted, as you said, Darrian. It's like you work really, really hard, and then there's a lot of waiting to see what the next steps are going to be. And in the meantime, you just focus on other stuff and plant more seeds, basically.
Okay.
With the screenwriting project, are you guys still actively involved in the process of the movie, or did you guys, when you say you sold it, did you sell it and now it's like out of your hands?
There isn't a lot for us to be active with at this moment. I think the honest answer is like we were active with it for a while with Netflix and with Simon after we sold it, and now it's moved on to other, it's moved on to next steps, and so we're kind of like waiting for updates, and but there's some cool stuff happening. We're excited to kind of move forward with it.
So just out of curiosity, like a project like that, like how long have you all been working on this screenplay until this point?
It's a good question. I don't have an exact answer for you, but it was something that we had written a draft of in maybe 2018 and then shelved it. And then when we were on tour, had started up with it again. And I think we did a new draft of it in fall of 2019. Shared it with our reps, and they really liked it. And so they kind of got the ball rolling from there.
Yeah.
So this is like this is years.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is actually quick. This is really quick. Like,
and you all still have like there's still years to go. Ish.
Cross your fingers that it's only a couple of years instead of like 10 years. But yeah, I mean it's and again, I think that speaks to the importance both on the screenwriting side, but also for us as musicians. Man, having as many, unless you've got like the one thing and it's like this is your baby and this is all you put your, like if you're a solo artist and like you just do your thing. But for us who are like hired guns and we specialize in a lot of different things, like quantity is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey man, I'm gonna ask you a question, man. And look, you ain't got to answer this, but you kind of do. How does the money work, man? How does the money work with something like this? Like I'm curious. Like, how do you even know how to set your price? And then how do you know that you're negotiating like points that you're going to get later and this kind of thing correctly?
On the writing side. Yeah. You're asking about on the screenwriting side.
On the screenwriting side, yeah. Luckily,
we don't have to worry about that. And our representatives and our lawyers take care of all of it. Oh, so right. The price of a script is set by how much different parties who are possibly bidding for it are willing to pay.
Oh, so it's like an auction. Like everybody shows up and they like, yo, I'll give you $2 billion right now for that.
if you have more than one buyer interested in the script, then yes, it works like that way essentially.
Wow. Okay, interesting.
But there's the Writers Guild and there's the union and everything, which sets sort of like here's what the suggested rates are and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
As a film composer, are you part of SAG or not? Does that work together?
No, there's really no union for composers. I mean, I think there have been attempts to unionize, but it's such a nebulous concept of like what a composer does and how you would assign like unionized rates and stuff for composing music. I mean, I'm not opposed to the idea. It's just I know that it's been tried in the past, and there's what's it called? The SCL, the Society of Composers and Lyricists, is probably the closest thing to a union, but they function more like a kind of I don't know, support group's the wrong term. Just like a guild, that helps people kind of learn the ropes. Is a poor way of describing it, but basically that's it.
Yeah, I think most unions for musicians in any capacity are kind of just like, I don't know. I always feel like I don't need your help, bro. Like I think you're asking for less money than I'm gonna ask for.
Yeah.
And gonna take a cut too.
And it's also this interesting thing where like some of the unions, like the musicians unions in particular, a lot of the rules and laws and stuff that are on the books now, came from a very specific situation in like the 40s or 50s or something. And
right.
Some of those things, we don't have to go into the politics and the specifics, but some of those should be adapting with the times, in my opinion.
You telling me they didn't account for Facebook and the internet in 1940?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey Nick, man, we getting close to time, and as always, I want to give you an opportunity to tell the people where they can come bid on your projects, buy your T-shirts, buy your hats, and where they can generally connect with you in all the places.
Man, I'm the worst person at social media. There's no place for you to buy anything. I'm not making any money. I mean, I have a website, njlmusic.com, which is, in dire need of being updated. And I'm on Instagram, and I guess that's basically it. But I don't have many products to shill, unfortunately.
Congratulations, you are working full time and you don't have time to take selfies.
Yeah.
What's your Instagram handle, man?
Oh, that's a good question. It's just Nick Jacobson-Larson, all one word. I'm looking down because I'm looking at it to make sure it's right. And it's both SON.
Okay, cool. So y'all go Nick Jacobson-Larson.
Yep, exactly.
To the Instagram, hit him up in his DMs and let him know how wonderful he is. We got a bunch of comments on this live feed, man.
Yeah, I'll try to figure out how DMs work if anybody. That's how much of a Luddite I am.
Oh man, that's all right. That's all right.
I think the process is you glance at them and then you're busy with something else and you forget.
Yeah,
and then, like 6 months later, you run into the person. You're like, "Oh man, I'm so sorry for not DMing you back."
That's usually how it goes, man. Man, Nick, man, thank you so much for coming on the Working Artist Project, man.
Hey, pleasure to talk to both of you guys. Greg, I hope to see you in the sax clarinet chair sooner than later.
I hope to be there, and I hope that the next person I see conducting is you.
Hey, there you go. Yeah. My name is Darrian Douglas.
I'm Gregory Agid. Nicholas, thank you so much, man.
Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.